Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Services third Thursday training. We've got a really exciting one today with a really awesome presenter. Before we get started, I want to mention that if you are just feeling really jazzed about this training and want to hear about other future trainings, a really great way to find out about them is to follow us on social media. And then, Kat, if you'll just click through to the next slide.
All right.
The other thing is that this presentation, along with most of our other trainings, are uploaded to our attorney resources page on our website. If you go to mvlslaw.org and then click on volunteer, you can click on attorney resources, which has been highlighted there for you. If you are not already an attorney with us and you want to be, you should click apply to be a volunteer lawyer. And if you want to take a case from us, you can click on the pro bono portal, which is just right there. And then, Kat, if you'll click to the, yeah, perfect. So this is what the portal looks like. And the really fun thing about it is that you can look at all the cases that we have available by county and by practice area. And so if you wanted to look at something in debt collection, or you wanted to look at something in family law, all of those topic areas are at the top, and then you can also select which county you want to look at. So, oh yes, and of course, here is a list of some of the trainings that we have coming up. This is not a complete list because we have trainings that we've actually scheduled out further than February 21st. But we've got some really exciting ones, especially our bankruptcy training that's going to be at the bankruptcy courthouse, and our estate planning and estate administration trainings that are in early February, and some other really fun ones. And then the best title of all, of Love and Regret, Family Law Hot Topics. And then we're going to have some big family law trainings coming up kind of later in the spring. So all really fun, great stuff. And so with that, I would like to introduce Kat Hyland, who is a wonderful volunteer with our organization and also generally awesome human being. And Kat is an experienced consumer law attorney. She's a solo practitioner, and she's also an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland School of Law, where she teaches law practice management, which is something anybody who would want to go into solo practice would certainly want to learn from Kat. So this is going to be a discussion about the common mistakes or problems that solo or small firms can run into when they're starting and growing. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kat. Thanks so much, Kat. Oh, I'm sorry. One other thing that I'm going to mention is just that if you have questions as we go along, there is a questions box. And I will pause. I'll just say, hey, Kat, we got a question. So please go ahead and type any questions that you have into the questions box, and then we'll answer them orally as we go. So with that, take it away, Kat.
All right. Thanks, Amy. You're also an awesome human being. And early happy holidays to everyone who still has them coming up, and past happy holidays to people who just celebrated. It's a great time of year to revisit issues that are common to law practice management, so I'm happy to be here giving this training. As Amy said, this is for people who are starting or partway through. If you're more experienced, please feel free to jump in with tips or questions about what you've done that might be applicable. We're all here just to gain more knowledge on how to have better law practices. And one of the things I love about working in Maryland is that we're such a friendly legal community for the most part, that we've all had our fiery disputes in court, but I really think that we benefit from information sharing on these issues, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to run a business. So please feel free to jump in. With that, really behind the scenes in this presentation, hurdles is just another term for obstacles or mistakes you can make in practice. So I'll be the first to admit that I've made many, many mistakes. This isn't going to be an admission of all of the ways in which someone could file a bar complaint against me. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just that it's really difficult to move forward and learn and grow in solo practice without stumbling across obstacles and making mistakes. And one of my mentors early on, Peter Holland, said, you're going to make mistakes, but it's about how you correct them that matters, and making sure that you don't cross any ethical boundaries in doing so, and learning and picking yourself back up. So I am a, shameless advocate of the fact that we can't hide from our mistakes. We can only learn and grow from them, and that there's a way to handle everything that may seem to slip out of your control. And that if you are experiencing more mistakes from certain areas, like lack of organization, then those are really just systems problems that you need to correct within your own practice. And that's something to take a closer look at. More scheduling errors, for example, can be evidence of how you're managing your workflow, or where your priorities are, and how other distractions in life have intervened. So it's not to beat yourself up over, but just to put a critical eye on and then learn from, because it's really, really hard to get through any kind of business without growing pains. With that, the 3 areas I'm going to focus on in this presentation deal with business management, clients, and quality of life. And nothing that I'm saying will hopefully make anyone feel badly about what they're doing, but these are common questions and hurdles that I have faced too. So when I was thinking of how to organize this presentation, I thought of things that I had been through, and I thought I better share the advice of how I dealt with it, and how my co-professor Chris Floor and I deal with these issues when we're teaching our students, so that hopefully you can learn and avoid some of these mistakes, or at least feel a little bit relieved that there are solutions that you can learn about in this presentation. And I like clean, so we're legal champions, right? That's just a little boost for our day. So business management, diving in. So this part just pertains to what happens as soon as you've launched. Where are you when you've launched? The first hurdle you might experience, and the hurdles are in bold in this presentation, hurdles/mistakes. I tried to keep it positive and not say, don't do this, or failure alert, or something like that. So I'm just focusing on what you might think the hurdle is, and then the positive spin or lesson that you could derive from it. So the first hurdle you may experience right out the gate is, I have no money. Maybe this isn't your situation. Maybe your spouse is employed and you can rely on them for the short term, or the longer short term when you're getting started, and that's excellent. But I teach my class as though you don't have any resources, and the positive message is that this is a hurdle that you can work to overcome. Like any other supply and demand economy, it's harder to get started when you don't have any money, but there are ways to get your practice up and running quickly to help you overcome this hurdle. So the first method is just keep your overhead low. Now, you need to be presentable as an attorney, but there are so many cool and different ways you can structure your office that can now help you overcome the traditional model of being a lawyer with a mahogany desk and several conference rooms and the entire set of legal encyclopedias. First off, you can get a lot of legal resources online. You can get reduced rate Westlaw from a couple of different sources in Maryland. One is by joining Civil Justice, which is a nonprofit that offers reduced Westlaw opportunities for the year. You can get an annual subscription. And another is by joining one of the bar libraries or law libraries and having access to those materials. So that just helps you invest less in paper resources. The idea of a virtual office is more and more sustainable these days. You can operate out of an office share where you and another attorney go in on space to have access to a conference room. You can use deposition services that offer a conference room that you can rent out for the day and that you can use with their court reporters. And you can also operate out of your own home. My advice to people operating out of their own home is to use basic safety precautions and to have something like a P.O. box address, and to also meet clients in public places or established legal centers like a law school conference room or a courtroom conference room when that's available. I discourage people starting out from and even continuing from going to client homes just on a whim. That's my personal preference. Also, bringing people into your home is a little bit risky too. So just, have a basic modicum of common sense about it. But there are so many ways to keep the overhead low. At the same time, I'm telling you a counterintuitive message. You have to make financial decisions that get you started sufficiently. So if you need Westlaw or you need LexisNexis to operate, you need to invest in that software, and you just have to bite the bullet and spend that money. So as a business owner, there's this curve of learning when to spend and when to hold back, and you have to put some cash out into your business in order to get started. So have access to credit if you don't have money otherwise. Be frugal and diligent in your spending and have a plan for how to pay down that credit using your own mock budget that hopefully you've put together with some goals, and we'll get to writing down your goals a little bit later. But you have to invest in your business in order to make the presentation that's key to provide your service. So you have to spend some money, but you have to also, there are ways in mind, to keep in mind for keeping your overhead low. That's my first tip. I'm new to the practice of law. So you may be new to the practice of law in general. You may be new to practicing on your own, which is scary and intimidating. So it's normal to feel that way at times. Or you may be coming to law from another career first. Here are a couple of tips to overcoming that hurdle. Get malpractice insurance. Just have a safety net. We're not required to carry it in Maryland, last I checked, but it's good to just have it as a blanket policy just for the same reason you have it on your car in case an accident occurs. Don't expect that you should have to practice completely on your own. I have been very fortunate in accessing mentors in my practice. When I was sworn in, I walked over to another table and signed up for Judge Battaglia's mentorship program, at which time I was paired with Dave Hoskins, who is a consumer attorney in the Maryland area, who took me under his wing and would meet with me weekly to go over my existing caseload, which was then at a public interest organization. And this was just a very helpful experience for me to have guidance. Now, my one piece of advice on this is that you shouldn't just have one mentor. You should have a couple of different mentors. So you should have someone in your practice area. You should have someone just in solo practice in general. And then you should just have a friend type mentor that you can confide in about mistakes or about challenges. They can be on your level or they can be above you, as a more traditional mentor. But there's a lot of stress that comes up in this practice, and I find it beneficial to work in a community of others because that becomes your support structure when something happens. Another key reason to have a lot of mentors is that you don't want to burn out people's time. People, in my experience, have been very generous with their time in sharing sample pleadings and giving some nuggets of advice, in agreeing to have lunch with you. It often works well if you treat to lunch or, coffee, if that's where you are, or if that's what time these people can give you. But don't go back to the same mentor for all of your advice, because you want to both get different perspectives on how you want to practice law, and then also just not make someone feel like you're monopolizing their time, even though they may like you or want to help your practice. It's good just to get little slices of different perspectives and then glue together your own perspective on how you're going to practice. One of the other mentors that I learned from is Jane Santoni, and something she told me from the very beginning was people are going to offer you many different perspectives on how to practice, especially when you're running your own business, and they're going to tell you that they think their way is right, but you really aren't going to launch or thrive until you find your way to practice that makes you feel confident and good. So one way to do that is to kind of get a little bit of knowledge from everybody out there and then put it together and package it your own way. And that's my advice too, since I got good advice from her. You want to build trusting relationships with other firms by not being a threat and not being overly competitive with your allies. And then my big piece of advice is that I often talk to people who want to pick and choose how they approach solo practice. And often they don't want to leave their day job, but they want to start a solo practice at the same time. Or it often happens that as soon as you make the decision to open your law practice, you'll get another job opportunity. And part of you will try to negotiate that and think, can I do this part-time while also working enter a position that you are probably overqualified for, because if it was easy to get, you might just, it might just be a part-time gig somewhere and you think it sounds like a good idea to splice together your work package. Look, your model has to work for you, and if you desperately need an income source during the day too, then I appreciate that. But my perspective is that when you try to launch a business, you have to go at it full time, and you have to prepare for the obstacle of putting all of your time into this one project and being dedicated to it, because it is during the business day that you have opportunities that you would not always have, that you have networking events, that you have calls from prospective clients. And you can juggle this, or you can work at night doing something, but I believe that solo life is a full-time commitment, and anyone who I've advised on this has typically taken that advice and not taken the part-time opportunity and believed in themselves for this short period of time to get over that curve of anxiety about leaving an income source behind. Now, many of us as solos have done some sort of law-related gig work. You know, we've taken court appointments. For me, it was the bail hearing program, being an appointed attorney at the district court. I did that from 4 p.m. to midnight in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, and it was a great experience and a brief exposure into criminal practice, which I don't otherwise do, and a good training opportunity. But it hit a point where the money I was making in that program was it was good, but it was necessary at the time, but I needed to learn how to find that income source through my practice area. And so I eventually started evaluating my consultation and flat fee work. And once I was outpacing in the latter category, I left that gig work behind. So that's up to you and your business model and how to weave in stipend opportunities, which you should totally take advantage of. But solo life is a full-time commitment, and I can't stress that enough just from my perspective. Also,
Hey, Kat,
we all bring... Yes.
We've got a question that came in. What tools do you recommend for accounting? While we're on the topic of the finances of your business.
I started with QuickBooks Online, then I went to QuickBooks, the desktop version, and I recommend working with an accountant if it's something that you can't, that you don't have time to manage on your own. So either work with an accountant or learn QuickBooks and learn how to sync your bank systems to input all of the data that you can then go through and code. I also use LawPay for taking payments because it has been MSBA and ABA approved, and it's a service that will make sure that money isn't inappropriately taken out of your trust account. I started out using PayPal, but I quickly learned I could not take trust payments because it would take a percentage of that. LawPay also syncs with a couple of the law practice management software services. So I use Clio in my practice, which is an overhead investment, but I felt it was necessary because it would capture the data from LawPay directly and also sync with QuickBooks when I needed financial reporting. Also for financial services, I made sure that my bank could sync with a payroll service. So I use Intuit Payroll, and I just get a data printout that then imports into QuickBooks for my payroll calculations. So you'll find that a lot of the services work in conjunction with one another, and one of the best ways to get started is to pick your law practice management software first, and then see what systems sync up with that on each package level and talk to them directly. A lot of these law practice management providers will discuss how they sync up with other services over the phone with you, which is helpful so you don't have to just guess at their website. Finally, you might have a common fear of getting started. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid to make a mistake. I'm afraid of ethical violations. I need some motivation to get myself started. I actually got most of my motivation from business books that weren't about law. I mean, I have so many motivating attorneys in my community who gave me, inspiring words, but just hearing about how people got businesses launched was really inspiring for me. I just went through some basic business books, like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which has some strange parts to it also, but was interesting on the whole. It's a little bit older. The Shark Tank cast, many of them have written books, and I've listened to them on Audible. They're just to get self-esteem stories or like success stories of other people who have started businesses on very low budgets. And just hearing little vignettes about the bakery that succeeded or the jewelry store that succeeded makes you kind of bring it back to terms and think, I'm a business too. And even though I do a specific task that has a very competitive and intimidating community, at the end of the day, the nuts and bolts of what I do match the same forces in the economy and have the same sorts of basic building blocks that, I need to succeed as well. And then something told me, one of these books told me early on, fake it till you make it. This doesn't mean do any kind of fake legal work or not, be disingenuous in what you can offer clients. But when you hold yourself out to the public, you have to work on your elevator speech, which is something I talked about in the last presentation I did last year on, getting started. What is your definition of how you see yourself? Who are you as an attorney? If you hold yourself out as an attorney in solo practice and keep repeating that, you'll find that you do gain more confidence for moving forward in this role. And you get a lot of positive feedback too, because this is, after all, a very brave decision that you've made. So business management part 2, gaining traction. Okay, so you dove in and you're starting to get work and starting to see how this all unfolds. There's my Shark Tank shout out there, because I'm a big fan. So one obstacle is I can't handle money, and we discussed this a little bit, so I'm not going to go into the first prong that much. But a second important thing to do is to know how to charge for your work. I know this sounds obvious, but it's something I really wasn't good at because I came to solo practice from a public interest law background, and I really liked the helping aspect of it. What I tell my students is there are 2 good ways to just look at your billable hour. One is to look at the Laffey matrix, which is a much higher market-based matrix, and the other is to look at the appendix to the U.S. District Court to see how fee-shifting cases work. Even if you're not in a fee-shifting type of law, like employment law or a consumer law like I am, it just gives you a range of what the federal court approves for fee petitions, and then you can look at those 2 matrices, 2 lists, and try to pick your billable hour in between. The other thing you really need to do is look at what other firms are charging. Now, this is something you need to have personal conversations about. We can't go on listservs and talk about these things because we have some, I think it's antitrust regulations or something like that in the MSBA listservs. But this is why it's important to have people you can trust and mentors, because you want to discuss what the going rate is. Now, you could walk into a store and see how much an apple is sold for, and you kind of need to do that with your legal product too, because you need to know when you're overdoing it and when you should be raising your rates. One of the best kept secrets in consumer law for me was that, or a secret that I should have known, was that some cases require more of a retainer fee. And this was kind of like a duh moment for me, because I thought more of my colleagues were doing work on straight up contingency. But sometimes you need more capital to get started, just like in any kind of work or project. So obviously keeping a fee agreement that complies with this is very important, but just getting that initial knowledge is important too, because you could be raising your rate when you don't otherwise know to do so, and that has a real economic effect on your business. This is a big thing that hit me about a half a year into solo practice for me. And it was, oh my gosh, I have so much administrative work. I'm mailing things, I'm scanning things, my files are piling up. And let me just tell you a story. My mother came to visit, and she's a retired social worker, so also like a helper personality type. And she spent a week helping me scan and go through things in my office. And this is a common thing. Other people I know have had, their husband or wife come in, their brother or sister come in, someone to kind of help them just get up to speed. And after this week, where my mom insisted on only taking very short lunch breaks and wanted to get right back to the office and got me really up to speed with a lot of my outdated scanning and learned how to use all the scanning computer systems, which was awesome because she's 75. After this, she just said, you're not going to be able to keep up with this unless you hire someone, and that's a financial decision that you really need to consider seriously. And I took her advice seriously, and I had a law clerk at first and then hired an administrative assistant about 6 months later, and it's a decision that I will never regret. My administrative assistant acts as my gatekeeper and makes sure that clients get scheduled into phone slots so we can have appointments to talk about updates in the case, which keeps us running more efficiently. And then she handles the mail, she handles scheduling in general, she handles case screening because we've worked on training in those aspects. And she can also help with drafting first versions of court documents just for entries of appearance or things that I ultimately review. And she has proficiency and can, work more if I'm willing to invest in that too. And so this has been a crucial part of me clearing the deck to focus on the legal work, which then allows me to get back to my billable hour. So I often hear people, my colleagues in solo practice, say that they have to go back to the office and do all of the scanning and mailing at night, and we discuss whether or not that's a good fit for their practice. Now, this is something that your overhead has to accommodate, but what I learned is it's actually really easy to pay people. And I know I'm speaking as though money just comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't. You know, I had to flex my model and make sure I was charging for consultations at this point when it was appropriate to do so. But once I worked on some of those aspects, I've always been able to pay for my administrative assistant's salary, and it's flowed from there. So this was a business decision, and Intuit Payroll Service made this very easy to handle. So the systems are there, the technology is there. You shouldn't be intimidated by the fact of hiring, because the systems will tell you when to mail in your employment forms and how much to pay in taxes, and it's just literally a click of a button at this point. I'm overcommitted. This happens when you're starting out and you've gained a little traction, as the slide says, and you actually have a workload. You are one person, and it can be very overwhelming when the work starts coming in. This is a good time to self-assess and just look at what work you're doing that you're doing because you're enjoying the work and you want to be doing free things for people, or you're going too far in a case. And it's not a message to stop going the extra mile, because that's what makes us good business people, but it is possible to overcommit in the practice of law, because it's tempting to take more cases knowing that you're getting more money for those cases, or you're likely to if you're doing contingency fee work. And moderating this is something that you need to do in order to provide a more efficient level of work for the clients that you do have. So it is possible that one of your obstacles becomes too much work, and this is where you need to do some internal evaluation. So one way to do it is to have regular check-in meetings, either with yourself or if there's a law clerk or assistant in your office to soundboard off of, to have coffee with a mentor and talk about caseload size and talk about client cases that might be taking up more of your time. And then just in general to assess what you're going to be doing at different points in the year, and whether or not you're going to have busier periods if you file more cases or you take on more defense cases at certain points in time. I don't have time for marketing. Yes?
We got another question in that might have come from a ringer, but this one asks about balancing out pro bono work with your paid work.
Sure. Sorry, just taking a sip of water over here. So pro bono work can be a great way to learn a new practice area, to be involved in the community, and to work on an area that overlaps with your existing practice area to get the benefits of some mentorship, some guidance, some tools, or to segue into like a Judicare type program where you're doing flat fee work. But I caution people in a previous presentation I've done on how pro bono work is really, really great, that there can be a pro bono trap that you fall into, where when you're starting out in solo practice, and this happened to me, you've taken on a lot of pro bono work because you feel good and you feel busy doing it. And then people in your life say, wow, you're really busy, you must be getting a lot of good work. And that's actually not true, because you're doing a lot of social good. And I would never discourage someone from doing the social good of it and taking pro bono in general, but it can occupy all of your time. And the reason that this can be a trap is because your pro bono client is as important as your paying client to the system as a whole. And you have the same ethical responsibilities that you have to your pro bono client that you do to your paying clients or your clients whose cases are going to pay you money. So that has to be balanced, and it can be something that takes up too much time in your practice. But this is a very personal decision, and I think lawyers sometimes get too much criticism for taking any pro bono work, because this is really up to you and using your tools for good. You can get a lot of good experience doing pro bono cases, and it can be really instrumental in fine-tuning your communication skills, your client selection skills, etc. So I would just say don't fall into that pro bono trap where you are using all of your hours to do that work instead, because you need to put your own oxygen mask on and keep your own business alive before you can go and help other people. And you can't be altruistic when you don't have your own strong structure to stand on first. Marketing, sometimes we let marketing slip when you're at this stage of growth, Consider branding, consider Facebook. I need to be better about being on my Facebook page and launching little messages about successes I've had in cases, and then track where your work comes from by each call you get. I keep a master spreadsheet, and this is a really good time of year to send some thank you notes to your referral sources. You may notice you're getting certain referrals from lawyers you know who went on vacation in a certain month, or just give you a certain type of case that they don't handle. It's just a really good time at the end of the year to say thanks for that work and to give a little personal update on what it meant to your practice to have that referral source. So marketing is a bigger conversation in general, but make a little bit of time for it. Make like 5 or 10% of your week for it, unless you have a paid service that you're using. Finally, my schedule is a mess. This is a real trap for solo practitioners, because as you get more and more work, you really need to be organized on it. You never want that call, counsel, you're supposed to be in court now, where are you? Or the note from the other side, I see we had a pretrial statement due yesterday. Here's my version of it. It's slanted towards my perspective of the case. Now, I'm hinting that maybe these experiences happened to me, maybe they didn't, but you need to get your scheduling in order using either a very clear-cut written system on a calendar, old school style, or by having your electronic dates input somewhere in a way that's trustworthy and then backed up. I use Google Calendar and Clio because they sync together. That's my system. Other people use Outlook Calendar and set reminders and alerts. This is just so important. I can't stress it enough. And when you make a mistake, don't walk in and accuse the other side of missing a deadline too, because I just believe we should always be responsible for our mistakes. And this is one where you can really make some mistakes unless you're very organized. So most small firms have an accountability checkpoint where mail may come in with deadlines on it, and it may go to an administrative assistant. And then after the administrative assistant uses our beautifully clear-cut Maryland rules to figure out when something is due, the attorney should also check it too as a best practice, to not just rely on someone else, because you can't turn around and blame your assistant or blame a system for making a mistake when you are the attorney and your name is on that document. Finally, I'm coasting along. So you may, in the intermediate level, just think I'm kind of like floating along. I'm making money, I'm doing things right, but everything is just case to case, or everything is just day to day. This is something that definitely happens once you start understanding the dynamics of business. And this is a good time to write down your goals and make some good decisions about where you want your practice to be. Are you okay with this level, or do you want to launch to a different stage? And that's a personal preference, but once you get the basic dynamics down and you have referral sources and you have some income and you have your books clean and you have all these other actually time-consuming, daunting things figured out, you can just kind of stay at the same level, and it's the level that you need to figure out and your own comfort that can be assessed at this point. You can get over that hurdle if you want to take it in a different direction or innovate your practice. So last slide for business management. Are we there yet? No, your business is this malleable, inconsistent, not constant thing. It can get larger or it can get smaller based on the moderation you're willing to put into it. And this can make it really excellent, because when, for example, you're me and you're getting married, you can, cut down on some of the cases that you want to take, or you can take on a whole lot more if you know this is the time of year where you'll have a burst of energy for new work. But nothing is predictable. Like, you don't know what cases are going to ultimately go well in court, what clients are going to stop paying you and what you're going to have to do about that, what victories you're going to have, what losses you're going to have, what burnout you're going to experience, what major family life event might occur. So just like with any other job, life happens while you're busy running your business, and there's no end point. I mean, that's what makes solo practice so great and so exciting. It can evolve and change as your business model is refined. So one thing to do every year is just look at your business model and look at your books from the year before in some, and make some conclusions about where you are and where you'd like to be. And that's one of the greatest things about having control over your work and your market. There's going to be evidence of errors and mistakes and hurdles, and then a reaction and how you overcame this stuff, and then data that you have after you've been up and running for a couple of years. Here are just some pointers on that. when you're succeeding, you might have a couple things happen to you. Fear of success. You might not want to push it to the next level because you might be okay with where you are, or you might be scared that you can't handle more without more administrative systems. That's one of the things that's really cool about Maryland. We have this fairly flexible legal market with so much unmet legal need that it's almost impossible to be bored with the practice of law. You can try new things. You can discuss other ways of practice with other people. You can attend solo seminars and learn new things about technology and marketing. You can always, I feel, do more, but the question is, do you have to? It's your own personal practice. You shouldn't feel pressure to go farther than you need to, but don't hold yourself back at the same time. That can be its own hurdle. Refusal to change. Sometimes we have such great influences from other people that we don't realize when they're not enabling us to grow anymore as a practice. And that ties into finding out how to practice or figuring out how to practice your own way and kind of flexing your muscle. Sometimes practices break up because people's opinions and emphasis on the other person's style have outlived their useful lives, to use a capital budgeting term. The system doesn't work anymore, and you need to figure out a new way to do something. Another thing that goes up and down in solo practice is your work ethic. Sometimes you feel as if you can't put anything more into it, and that's when you should be pushing yourself harder. Sometimes you're pushing yourself so hard that you might be burning out. So you have to look at your work ethic and think, is this what I realistically think, like my honest moment in conversation with myself is best for my business? Is it as strong as it could be, or is it weak right now? Should I be pushing myself? And then finally, you can easily beat yourself up about what goes wrong in cases or mistakes that you've made. Sometimes it's just not you. This is not an easy way to manage a law practice. No one is coming to you with a consistent paycheck or with the right way to do everything. So don't be so hard on yourself. Move on from things that don't work and look forward and try to be optimistic about business, because business is supposed to be fairly fun if you're entrepreneurial and this is what you really want to be doing. So next phase, clients. Here are some basic things on clients and hurdles you might encounter. Where do I get some? All of my students in law practice management are terrified that they're never going to get clients. And the number one thing we say is that in Maryland, people want to know if you're available. And they often choose you because you're available, especially in this market, in the solo and small practice management market. Now, I have had people say, well, I want to be an entertainment lawyer in Maryland, and this is proving to be difficult. You need to see what areas are commonly practiced in your market and make a reasonable decision of your practice area based on that. So I'm not saying that you can get a client in any conceivable practice area, but if you're picking one of the basic building blocks of practice or basic practice areas, then there is typically availability or a way to learn more from the succeeding practices to see what they're doing to get clients. So that should be a hurdle that you get over fairly quickly. I don't know where to start. So yeah, it's great I'm saying you can get over it, but how do you do this? I find a multifaceted approach is the best way to get over this hurdle. Look at what events are going on in your practice area, what pro bono opportunities will teach you something or help you connect with people, what stipend work you can get, like I talked about before, what are your referral networks? Is there something you can sign up for to learn how to take good cases or to get an occasional good case? Because not everything that comes through a referral network is going to be gold. Life just doesn't work like that. And then finally, this is where mentors are really important, because a solo attorney who's succeeding can't do everything too. And if they've figured it out, you can benefit from them figuring it out. You know, they'll have a demanding workload, and if they trust you and respect your work and respect your ambitions, then they can siphon some of that over to you when they can't handle it, because they'll have reached a point of maximum saturation. So the attorney network is, I believe, one of the stronger ways to get work, either through formal systems where you work with a bigger firm, or informal systems where, like I said, your attorney friend goes on vacation a couple times a year and says, send everything over to Cat Highland, she'll handle it. I will take castaways. Now, this is both sometimes a mistake and a hurdle. Cases sometimes come to you when another attorney has fired the client or the client has fired the other attorney. I say always get permission from the client to talk to the other attorney, and if they won't give you that permission, that's a red flag. Don't make that mistake. And then the same for pro se litigants. they can be across this wide spectrum. Some are really competent and can work on their own pleadings. Some are annoying the court with their mere presence. Some have actually succeeded in court a little bit. Maryland has limited scope rules, which you can learn more about through different resources, like Civil Justice has some resources on this. There's a time and a place for limited scope or unbundling a case. But I'd say look at the client and look at the case's status and see if there are red flags. Is this an appeal that isn't going to win? Is this something that you're looking at just because you need cash right now? I would say I had made that mistake in looking at cases that I shouldn't have looked at because they were at a bad place, and I was just thinking that I should do it to be a smarter business person and increase cash flow. And you want to be hesitant because that case is going to end up taking your time away from good paying cases that will come in later on. And then finally, if the client has done some damage in their own case, like they filed a bad complaint or they filed a complaint that needs to be amended, you can do that, but you want to make sure that the window to do it hasn't passed with the court and that you have time, because unless you have time to thoroughly vet a pro se litigant's case, then you may be stepping into uncharted territory that could end up hurting you. Then the second part of clients is we got issues. Now, a lot of problems happen in attorney-client relationships, and if these mistakes or these hurdles come your way, it's not always your fault. But the first thing you can do is just be better about client selection. This is a lesson I tell myself over and over again because I get so excited about a certain type of case, or I've been looking for a certain type of case and it comes in the door and I just want to jump on it. But I need to take a step back and think of whether or not I can have a relationship with this client that's going to last 1 to 2 years, depending on the type of work you do. This is where your gut instinct is important, and don't let your enthusiasm for the practice area or the type of case overlook that, because a client that you can't work with just because you have a personality difference or they don't understand how you're communicating or you don't understand what they mean is just going to cause you so much stress and potentially be something that, you know, they file a grievance against you for later, and totally not worth it if everything told you to run away in the first place. It's kind of like going on a bad date. Don't date the person that has the fancy car just because they have a fancy car. Date them because you can hang out and, you know, Netflix and chill with them. So I'm so excited to have opportunities. Oops, sorry, recipes are popping up. I'm so excited to have opportunities. It's better to be safe than sorry. You have to look at what you can learn in that moment. Now, it's so intimidating to start your practice and think, I have a knowledge gap I need to fill in with experience in my practice. And this is totally normal. You will feel like you don't know all the answers and don't have all of the sample pleadings, but there's a reasonable limit to what you can understand and learn for someone's case, and that goes into your competence as an attorney. So don't let the excitement to have work overwhelm the time commitment that you're going to put into getting up to speed on that particular case. It's okay to take something new as long as you can diligently and safely represent that person because you have a good mentor or you have the pleadings you need to succeed. But don't go into it being totally in the dark, because just like learning subjects in school, there's some stuff that you'll get and some stuff that's going to be harder to learn. And in my experience, the stuff that's harder to learn isn't going to make you profitable as a business unless you take a separate chapter of your time and life to learn that stuff. And doing it experimentally in someone's case without the proper guidance, mentorship, and practice forms is not worth it. You waited until the last minute. And by this, I mean the client calls you and they have a hearing in 2 days. This is their problem. This is not yours. This is a dangerous situation to get into unless you already know how to solve this problem pretty quickly and you have the time to jump into it. But sometimes the other person's stress just comes through the phone or comes through the meeting and gets to you too. And that's space that you're letting someone into that you need not let them into. You can tell the person, go to court and get a continuance and then call my office if you still want help. But be quick to pass on an opportunity that's so last minute that it's going to take over your life just to get in and fix the fact that someone else had this issue for probably over 30 days and decided not to do anything about it because they panicked. And panic is a normal part of human nature, but not your problem in a business. I can do more for this person. As I mentioned before, I had a public interest background. It's possible to go into someone's life and fix everything for them, and they might even let you or ask you to. But know when your scope of representation is over, send a closeout letter and move on. You can keep in touch with that client. You can get their Christmas cards, as I'm looking at a really lovely Christmas card on my desk from a client from 1.5 years ago with their beautiful family. You can stay in touch. You can send out seasonal letters. You can troubleshoot over small issues without taking someone on as a client. Give them a referral, give them some basic advice. But if you are, for example, a family law attorney, you don't have to represent them in their car accident or fix their problem. You can form a good relationship with another attorney and have them solve their problem instead. Otherwise, people love free stuff and they love friends and having more people in their lives, and they will let you keep doing work that you're not being paid for. If your client's unhappy, it's not your problem unless you're directly related to the cause of that, and that may just be from bad communication. But someone else's sorrow and misery and the fact that they hired an attorney because they have a problem is not your burden to shoulder. And as lawyers, we really need to avoid this thing called compassion fatigue by being too involved in other people's situations. So having a line between where their issue is and where the business aspect of your relationship is hugely important. This person seems crazy. Okay, so sometimes people are really anxious and upset because they came to you with a problem, and you need to filter out, are they irrational? Are they incapable of taking my advice? Throw some testers out there and see how they respond to your basic advice and the steps that you give them to work on their own case too, because they have to be participating in this process. And if they can't handle that, maybe they're not someone who is rational that you can work with, and that's where the gut instinct thing is really hugely important. But sometimes they just need more information about what's going on in their case, and they don't understand that you're busy. And you can try communicating with them in writing, in letters and emails and update calls. And if they just need a little bit of information to be assured and they're okay, then that's a client you can probably keep. But if they're too anxious and they're going to dominate your time irrationally, then maybe that's not someone that you can work with. And it's a mistake to keep working with that person, because sometimes people are never happy or they're just not logical about things, and you need clients to make key decisions. Finally, there comes a point in everyone's practice where someone just goes off the deep end, or they're dealing with so much stress in their life that they're taking it all out on you, and they're not functioning in the business relationship of being a good client. That's where you need to document everything very carefully. You need to run the scenario by someone else, another attorney, and then you need to fire clients when they, at a point in the case when it's appropriate to do so, appropriate to give them notice and file a motion to withdraw. But you can't keep problem clients, particularly when they've created a conflict in your relationship. So you do have to sometimes get rid of problem clients, either before you file the case that will take you down a bad road, or at a critical juncture in the litigation where it's going to be appropriate for the court to let you out of that case and give the client notice to employ a new attorney. And it's really crummy and it's horrible to give up on something that you've invested your own time into, but it's worth it to preserve your business, your reputation, and your sanity. So finally, I just wanted to talk for a couple seconds about quality of life, because one of the reasons a lot of us go into solo practice is to have more control over the life that we're going to have. And I have a couple of thoughts on that can be hurdles or mistakes we might make. One is, I need to work all of the time. So my mentor, who I mentioned before, Peter Holland, told me early on in like a very wise way, the law is a jealous mistress. And I was like, what is that? I don't really understand that. But what he meant is that, your business is always going to be there as something you can expand and grow, like I talked about before. And you're going to feel so committed to that and invested in that, and it really reflects a lot of who you are as a person. But you can't work all the time. You can't just give yourself to this without reaping some of the benefits of why you're in business to begin with, which is to ultimately have more control over your money and your time and your work-life balance. So you can be more efficient with the use of your time and cut down on ways in which it overrides or overtakes the rest of your life. I talked about that before, like by hiring extra help. You can also hire some people to do contract help for you, just drafting some mundane discovery that you review before you send out, stuff like that. But if you feel you need to work all the time, and maybe that's your decision you want to make to work all of the time, that's one thing. But this is something that you have control over, so you can be flexible about it and work to get your practice started, and then put systems into place that make things more efficiently. Remember, we're not going to libraries all the time. We're not sitting down at typewriters and writing things out. We're not printing everything out by hand or writing out longhand for everything that gets submitted anymore. We practice very differently from how people practiced 50, 30, 20 years ago, and you have to use these efficiencies to your benefit. And they're there for you to use so that you have more time to do what you want with your life. Solo life is a great way for me to be super flexible. Here's the opposite side. I meet with people who are getting started, who like start their workday at 10, end it at 2, and like, you know, do all of these fun sounding things in the meantime. And maybe they have other sources of money, or maybe this is something that they want to do at this point of time in their life or something. But running a business is a contact sport. It's competitive. It's something that grows when you put more effort and energy into it. It's not so at first you can do other things with your day, especially things that require spending a lot of money. So these are the same people that are sometimes like, well, I might want to get this part-time job and something else. And it makes me question, are you really starting a business, or are you just not dealing with the fact that solo practice is its own time commitment? It's a great way for you to be flexible in the long run when you have systems in place that are generating the cash that you need to stay in a good position in accordance with your goals, but it's not something that you get to do right away, at least in my opinion, and everything again is my opinion based on my research and experience. But there's a line to which you get to be flexible. You can't flake out and not show up for your job, because this is ultimately your job, and you should be treating it as seriously as other people treat jobs where they're at someone else's command. You are your own boss, and that requires a great degree of self-discipline. Balancing business and family, this is a tough one. One of the things that I have my students do, and I think it's a good thing just to remember to do, is to stop being so focused on your mission in solo practice when it comes to being considerate of other people. And I know that sounds like something that we should all do anyway, or maybe I'm being too obvious, but you spend 3 years in law school being so absorbed in how important it is to be in law school and succeed in it. And then there's the bar exam, and then there's your first job if you do something before you launch a solo practice. And you're on this like competitive track to just being so into what you're doing that sometimes your family gets neglected. And it's not that you're doing it on purpose, but just take a second and step back and check in with these other people in your life, because they'll really appreciate just a little bit of attention, or, you know, more attention if you already give them a lot of attention, and just try to talk about whatever is going on in their life for a couple seconds before talking about how exciting your business is. And then finally, you're human. Check your physical health, check your mental health. These things often get neglected for attorneys. We all know the stats on how dangerous it can be to work in this profession. We have really good resources in Maryland for this. We have the Lawyers Assistance Program through the Maryland State Bar Association. We're one of the first states that put this program into effect. It allows you to get free counseling from the MSBA, free confidential counseling, or to refer someone for free confidential counseling, so that you have a therapist you can go and talk to, or the people in your office, I think, can go and talk to also, just about the burdens of the practice of law, or you know, an increasing substance reliance, or a dependency, or sleep deprivation, or whatever pattern is emerging. This resource is there for you to get some sort of check, and I can't stress enough how important it is to take advantage of that resource. I mean, you could go in thinking you're going to talk about your workload and talk about some other issue in your life, like a bad relationship, and that's totally okay. Just use what's out there, use this community of support, because the last thing you want to do is burn out and be in a bad position. And then finally, go on vacation. This isn't something I could do for a couple of years until I had more stability, but just allowing yourself to recharge and not letting the clients dominate your time in life is so important, not letting the work take over your life. We just need healthy recharges, and other cultures are so much better about doing this than we are, and a lot of them seem to get along just fine. So, you know, take what you've earned back, basically. Enjoy what your practice is supposed to be yielding, and, you know, use some of the profit to have meaningful experiences in life, or hike a mountain, or try something new, or sign up for a language class. But, you know, work on the purpose of working, which is to enjoy life more too. So finally, here are some resources. I've mentioned a couple of them. Obviously, you know the great MVLS, the reason we're here, the MSBA, Civil Justice, that Lawyers Assistance Program that I talked to you about before. These are 2 books that I use in my class, and then there's so much cool stuff out there on Facebook and in listservs that we have circulating through these various organizations that I've mentioned, where you can soundboard off of other attorneys, just ask for quick advice, being mindful of client confidentiality, of course, but you're here in a greater community, and the more you act in that community, the more your presence expands, and you're able to relate more with other people and build on the blocks of everything that I've talked about before. And then finally, here's my contact information. Please never hesitate to contact me with any questions about anything or to learn more about mistakes I've alluded to and how you can avoid them in your own practice. So with that, I'll take any questions or wish everyone a happy holiday season.
Kat, thanks so much for all of that. That was some really incredible information. We have a couple of minutes left if there are any additional questions that people want to type into the chat box right now, or type into the questions box right now. I will mention again that this training is going to get posted to our website if you want to be able to go back and refer to it. And you want to hunt down the books that Kat was talking about or anything else. And again, you can access our training schedule from our website or follow us on social media to learn more. And I don't see any other questions coming through. So I think with that, I will say, Kat, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that we both share warm wishes for a happy and healthy holiday, or happy and healthy New Year's to everyone on the call. So thanks so much.
Sure thing. We do. All right. Thanks again.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.